Yes. This meeting of the Washington County Board of Commissioners is now in session pursuant to adjournment with the Honorable Chairman Greg Mattingly presiding. Come to order, remain standing.
Thank you, Sheriff. The first order of business this evening is our prayer, which will be led by Commissioner Edens, and our pledge to the flag, which will be led by Commissioner Ford.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for the blessings of this day. We thank you for the many blessings that you shower on our lives each and every day, Lord Father. Proud of you just truly are to us, Lord. Father, I pray that you be with this body, County Commissioners, this governing body tonight, Lord. And that you lead, guide, and direct us, Lord. Give us your discernment as we make decisions for our county, for our county people, and for one another. Father, I pray, Lord, that you just follow your guidance each and everything we do, and that we strive to make everything we say and do tonight be pleasing in your eyes. And Father, I ask one more thing, Lord, before we come to business. I ask, Lord, that each one of us will strive to grow up as Christians, to show you through our lives something that we may say or do, or something that someone may see in our lives that they're missing, Lord, that we can show you with them. Father, I pray for the people that are lost and undone, and I just pray that we do our part as a witness. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Let's honor America.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, if we go to the roll call screen, go ahead and indicate your presence here tonight. All right, we do have 15 present, and we have a quorum tonight. All right, the next item is approval of the agenda. We do have several items, two items, the TIF agreement, as well as the TIF project that have been requested by the JCDA to be deferred until the March meeting, till they can get some further items. I'm sorry, the February meeting. The original email was March, but this one is February. And as well, the Mitch Cox pilot agreement has been requested to be removed from the agenda this evening. And it has not been rescheduled to be back on the agenda. So if I could have a motion for the agenda. Mr. Tester, did you have a motion? Second. Have a motion and a second to approve the agenda, less those items that I brought forward. Discussion? Questions been called? All those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. The agenda is approved with the noted changes. Next item is the public comment section of the meeting. We do have those items that have been pulled from the agenda this evening and rescheduled for a later time, or some items have not been rescheduled. We do have a presentation this evening by the Mitch Miller from NetRep, and it's going to talk about TIFs and pilots and their performance. with these items off the agenda, I know several folks have signed up to speak this evening on public comment. With the rules of the commission sets forward that we can speak on items that are placed on the agenda. However, with those items coming off, some of you may not want to wait, or may want to wait and speak to the commission the night of the vote or the consideration of these items. Or if they are considered. However, we do have a few. If you would like to, when I call your name, if you would like to defer to speak till these items are on the agenda. Our first speaker tonight was Dwayne Cothran. Are you here, Mr. Cothran?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to speak, Mr. Cothran?
Yes.
Okay. If you'll come forward, give your name and address to the clerk, please.
2316 Highway 81 South, Jonesboro.
And if you'll...
So I'm not able to speak on the behalf of the TIF.
No, those items aren't on the agenda tonight.
Okay, well,
But no, we do have a presentation about TIF on the agenda. So it's not a legislative presentation. Like
Yeah.
there wouldn't be anything being passed here tonight. It's just an informational.
well, good.
Session.
That's all right. That's good. We'll,
All right,
we'll
so-
catch her next time. But
All right, so
I've
we'll
got
go ahead and start your
my
3
big
minutes.
thing was here that I've caught Scotty Buckingham here. This is amazing. Can't believe he's here. I mean,
Well,
my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Well, I tell you what, I just want to hit on this a little bit. I think the Washington County taxpayers need to know we got a guy down there not doing his job. And he came in there yesterday raising our taxes.
you're out of order. You're out of order,
Okay.
Ms. Coffin.
All right,
I'll
But-
give you leeway this time.
But anyway, I've had numerous people that's told me he's been out to Lowe's, different places, shopping, and not taxpayers pays him to be down there to take care of, you know, the property, taxes, everything, but, you know, he's out here, you know, he's got building stuff going on, and he's out shopping around, so we got people watching. They're just, you know, people's telling me, so, you know, and I've seen him myself. So we need to. I just want to let everybody know, you know, we need
Okay.
need to be keeping our eye on all this, and the commissioners. I think you're all for the taxpayers, so, you know, is that right? Do we just put people in office and let them?
Well, you need to direct your comments. It's just not like a question and answer
Oh, okay.
with the commission. They shouldn't be responding to your
I was
questions.
just, you know, I'm just curious about that. You know,
Right.
I've
Because really, they're not Mr. Buckingham's supervisors. The taxpayers, you know, we're really not his supervisors.
Yeah. Well, we need, you know what I mean, just take care of the taxpayers there.
I know that's this commission's.
That's what keeps
Most
this county
interest.
going.
Yes,
you know?
sir.
Thanks.
We appreciate your comments. All right, our next speaker tonight is Michael King. Mr. King, are you here? He may have already left. Okay, he may have already left. Is it Jimmy Neighbor? Neighbors? All right. Ed Cantor, come on up, Ed, to the podium. Thank you. You'll give your address to the clerk, Ed.
I don't work for the county anymore, so I don't guess they see me anywhere. If they see me somewhere, I'm supposed to be there. where's Steve Light at?
Well, you're retired now, aren't you, Ed? I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
right,
I
so
mean,
they might see me anywhere up the courthouse, they might still think I work up there or something. I don't have anything to gripe about, I just wanted to come, and thank the commission for the 37 years almost that I worked for the highway department. Some of you know me, like Steve, Greg, and, I just recently retired from the highway department. I managed their asphalt plant and ran their state certified lab. And just wanted to come before you and thank you tonight for allowing me the opportunity to work and the benefits of the job. And I didn't get to load too much. I was kind of pinned down. So just a little bit about what I did when I first came to work there in 1982. They didn't have much of an asphalt program. They had an asphalt plant, but they had one mix design, one mix they used on all roads, whether it be topping or base or anything like that. And now we have 7 to 8 different mixes that coincide with state mixes. And we had one stockpile, one size rock, you know, and now we've got 5 or 6 different ones that allows the opportunity to make the mix that we made for the roads. And we didn't have a lab at that time, and so there's only 2 that I know of. They have added some recently. Greene County has one, we have one that's state certified. It enables the county to do state aid work, save taxpayers money. Example of that was approximately $1,200,000 this year alone in state aid money that we did on received on our roads. And none of this would have been possible without the highway superintendent and the commission supporting me to allow me to do what I did about setting up a state certified lab. I went and took the certification test, and I designed all their mixes and test all their mixes, along with managing their asphalt plant. I've always tried to do a good job for the citizens of Washington County. I worked for the highway superintendent, but I always felt like I worked for the citizens of Washington County. I recently had to retire due to some different circumstances. I'd hoped to fully train someone to continue the work that we'd set up for the state aid, and that was not possible. And I feel like my work has benefited the highway department immensely and the people of Washington County, and feel honored to work for them. And just once again, I want to thank you and all the commissioners in the past. Over 37 years, I've seen quite a few come and go, and had pretty good commissions, and really liked working with the people. And I guess I'll miss working there. Probably still come to commission meetings, hang around the courthouse, like the people. So just want to thank you all for allowing me to do that.
thank you, Ed. We appreciate your service. All right, our next speaker is James Reeves. James, if you'll come forward to the podium.
I do have some handouts, if that's okay. It's pretty much stuff right off the state website or your own county's website, but I just put it in the...
Sure.
Beginning of it deals with some of the tip stuff.
Thank you.
James Reeves, 125 Cindy Ann Drive, Gray, Tennessee. So some of the earliest, the beginning of that is just some property real estate assessments pulled off the state about, you know, the 2 properties, the TIF property and the pilot program, which has either been moved or delayed. So we won't get into that tonight, but there's some interesting things in there. One's something right off the audit for the TIF program saying they've already given earnest money for the Sevier building, and they've already secured a loan. So it's the cart before the horse sometimes, but that's for you guys to decide. Going on to it, something that happens every year, and I look forward to it, which is strange, but I do. The annual report comes out in January, and this is where I get to see where some of the mistruths or deceits come in the county budgeting as it goes on. Right there in the middle of the report, and I've included some of this in the 2017 report, it showed $28 million in the capital funds project. That was the fund balance. They had, what does it say exactly? It said that they had encumbered the money, about $19 million of it. As of June of 2018, there's actually $21.5 million in the capital funds balance. But over $19 million of that is encumbered. It's included in there. It's in your big report you got tonight too. I just know where to look. Been doing it for 13 years. I would like to know of the nearly $17 million that's encumbered in what they call the education school capital projects. They have $17 million encumbered in that area. How much of it is left for Boones Creek, what's for buses, you don't know. You can't get in those specifics. It just amazes me that, the paper says there's only $5 million in the fund balance as of June 30th, but there's really close to $21 million. It's just give us the truth. I don't have to wait 6 months to see the truth. Because when I looked at the June meeting and looked at the financials for year end, it looked like we paid for Boones Creek twice. That's in there. I don't like how we paying for it twice. The actual's in there, $25+ million, and then 17, 18, it shows again we're paying out another $25 million. Also relieved to see that our county debt was never over $200 million. Never was. It's in there. There was people who said it was. It's just not what? It's not true. Another thing that was said a lot of last year, the county taxpayers pay $6 million, pay $12 million in interest every year. We don't. We pay $6 million in interest every year. That's in there because it's in that report. I hope you guys take the time to read it. There's a lot of good information in there. I read it every year thoroughly. There's also a little thing I included on the end there, and it's about how the state of Tennessee it does not restrict how much we borrow as a county. So that should never come into play. We all decide what the debt limit is here in this room for the most part. I like to inform some that I do know what I'm talking about, and I try to stay very informed. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, James. All right, the next item, Mr. Ed Wolf. Ed?
I defer till
Okay.
next month.
Thank you, Ed. All right, that'll conclude our public hearing, and we'll move back into regular session. We do not have any items on the Planning Commission agenda this evening. We do have the minutes from the January 8th meeting and the minutes of the January 8th meeting for the Board of Zoning Appeals in your packet. We do have several resolutions for special recognitions and proclamations. Mayor Grandy?
Tonight we have a super special honor with the family. Mr. Jack Daniels would like to come up here and be recognized. As you know, recently we lost a great friend of the county. Person devoted a lot of hours and time to serving the citizens, taxpayers of Washington County. And we have a proclamation to his honor. Thank you all for being here. Ethan, Jim, Jerry, Jim and Jason. Thank you all for being here tonight. Whereas Jack Dalton Daniels served Washington County as trustee for 28 years, from 1986 until 2014. And whereas Jack Dalton Daniels, the son of William C. Bill and Anna Crawford Daniels, was born, raised, and educated in Washington County, and was a member of Brethren Church all his life. And whereas he enlisted in the United States Army in 1954, and in 1955 married his bride, Eva Nell White, on leave from the service, and returned to Johnson City in 1956 to attend East Tennessee State College. And whereas he graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree and Business Administration degree in 1959 and went to work for private industry before becoming an auditor for the state of Tennessee. And whereas in 1986 he sought the trustee post of Washington County, stating that the office would be operated in an efficient and professional manner, and a promise to the community he kept for almost 3 decades. And whereas many in the community considered him a legend, as he went about the business of collecting the county's property taxes while accounting for and distributing county funds. And he prided himself as having tried to meet the highest standards in meeting the responsibilities of the position and assuming the challenging aspect of being the tax collector. And whereas Jack Dalton Daniels' common sense and humor illustrated the role of taxation when he answered the most commonly repeated question of, where do my tax dollars go, by asking, well, what road did you use to get here this morning? And smiling. And whereas the celebration of his service to Washington County accompanied his retirement in August 2014, where his lifetime colleagues spoke of the friendship they had found while working with him. And whereas the day after Thanksgiving, Jack Dalton Daniels passed away peacefully on November 23rd, 2018, surrounded by his family. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Washington County, Tennessee, that we do hereby recognize and appreciate and applaud Mr. Jack Dalton Daniels for his willingness to serve and befriend Washington County, and declare the week of February 25th, 2019 as Jack Dalton Daniels Week in Washington County. Anybody know why we chose that week? Of course, that's what taxes are.
Motion made to approve the proclamation, seconded by Commissioner Ford, seconded by Commissioner Wheeler. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Proclamation passes. Thank you all so much. All right. We have another item on the agenda for the Board of Commissioners. It's under proclamation. It's your UT Extension Report to the people. It's on page 12. Is there any questions about the... Okay. The UT Extension Report to the people is on page 12. Is there any questions? Seeing none. All right, next item is receive and consider the minutes from the December 7th, 2018 regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Do I have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Edens, seconded by Commissioner Fitzgerald to accept the minutes. Discussion? Yes, sir. the UT Extension report to the people on page 12. I asked if they had any questions. It's just a report from the Agricultural Extension Office, what they've been doing. I don't know if Connie Sharp or Anthony's here tonight, but they could help you, I'm sure, if I don't see them here tonight. All right. Receive and consider the minutes from the December 17th meeting. We had a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Next item under elections, appointments, and confirmations is Resolution 19-116, is a resolution confirming the county mayor's reappointments to the Budget Committee. We have a motion to confirm this. Motion made by Commissioner Ford, seconded by Commissioner Edens to approve the resolution. Discussion? Questions been called? Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen, go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes. Next item is the report of the officials and committees. The county mayor's report. Mayor Grandy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, good evening again, everyone. We are at the top of the year. A new year has begun, and it has been 150 days since the new team took office and the new term began. The Tennessee statute does not specify exactly how a mayor is to go about providing leadership and directing the county in policy areas, but my experience in business as a volunteer and county commission has taught me how important it is to have the best possible picture of the county as a whole in order to understand its parts. I've reached out to elected officials to encourage a smooth operation with better communication between government agencies. One department picks up where another one ends. And what better example of that dovetailing is there between the assessor and the trustee? I've asked each of them to be with us here this evening to give us an update on tax collection and what to expect with the 2019 being a reappraisal year. This commission, with its seasoned veterans and its newly elected representatives, you 15 commissioners, now have your first quarter's work behind you. And that includes a Saturday goal-setting retreat to workshop priorities. Thank you all for taking time away from your families on a January Saturday morning to identify how you can come together in order to achieve the goals that we set out for the county. Progress requires cooperation, and I am so proud to work with the legislature that wants to develop ideas that will improve Washington County, not just critique it. So this meeting presents a good opportunity to address you all generally and answer some of the initial questions I have heard my first few months of serving as Chief Financial Officer of Washington County. I hope to also provide some insight into what the Chairman has on the agenda this evening and where I see us heading over the next few months. By the way, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for including me and the other officials at the early part of the meeting so that the public and the Commission have the benefit of any comment before considering the business at hand. It's no secret that I view one of my highest priorities to be the creation of jobs that will help raise the median income for people in Washington County. It's never about the money, it's about how the money is valued and what it buys. The fundamentals, housing and food. Then there's basketballs, baseball gloves, dance and music lessons, math tutors, cars, insurance, college tuition, and something to share with the church, with friends and neighbors. The list goes on. But the point is, that with the job opportunities come personal opportunities. There's lots of value in a quality, stable job. So turning to jobs, that brings me to the introduction of Mitch Miller and Alicia Summers of Northeast Tennessee Regional Economic Partnership, aka NetRep. In the 5 years that Alicia has been with NetRep, she has assisted in the creation of more than 3,000 new jobs and assisted communities and companies in securing more than $9 million in grant funding. She has helped bring $92 million in wages to the region, $65 million in Washington County. She's an ETSU alum who brings to this region the benefit of years as a business consultant with the State of Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development and as an executive director of the Northeast Tennessee Valley Regional Industrial Development Association. So why am I spending all this time talking about Alicia? It's because in Washington County, we rely on her expertise. She is responsible for industrial recruitment, industrial retention and growth, site development, workforce development, and incentive negotiation. Her insight into state and regional standards gives her the ability to negotiate conservatively and still get the deal done. But first, Mitch Miller. Mitch was recruited from Charlotte, North Carolina with 4 years of executive experience as a highly competitive and successful market. He was part of the creation of Washington County Economic Development Council, which is now part of NetRep. As CEO of NetRep, Mitch has the daunting task of keeping focus on teamwork and an umbrella organization that covers a good-sized region of counties, each with its own individual priorities. It is because of their expertise that I've invited them here this evening to provide background information to, one, better understand the difference between a TIF and a pilot, both of which may sound familiar without actually being understood, and two, to share with us a summary and review of each of the key terms in the 7 pilots agreements that are in Washington County today. So, with that, Mitch, would you join us up here? I'm going to stand out of the way.
Thank you, Mayor.
Everyone have a packet? We're good? Okay. Mayor, thank you for the introduction. Chairman Mallerly, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Really appreciate that. Want to make this really informal. I do have a presentation. It is in front of you as well, but anytime during that presentation, if you have a question, my feelings won't be hurt if you stop, ask that question, or just interrupt me. So feel free to just do that. So as I've thought about the position that most of you are in, as new commissioners coming in and trying to understand everything from school funding to how government works, operational side of it, and then economic development is thrown in there. I want to take the opportunity to apologize. I should have been here a lot sooner in terms of when you first took office to talk about who NetRep is and what we do. I think that's vitally important. I know some of you personally. I've had the opportunity to work with some of you over a period of a few cycles of being on this commission as well. So some of you may know me, but for those that are new to this commission, I do apologize for that. And so I really wanted to take the opportunity tonight, especially considering some of the projects that will be coming up at a future time, and talk about who we are, what we do, and our role in economic development and role in working with each of you as commissioners. So the best way that I can do that is really starting off with our mission statement. There's 2 primary things that we focus on, and that is job growth and increasing the tax base. Those are 2 very important things that ultimately put money in the coffers for the county. The idea of what we do is really working with existing companies, community leaders, engaging those opportunities with existing companies to grow. Some of you have been part of boats in the past, like with Mulligan Flooring and Dentsply. But also, too, really looking at opportunities to build their supply chains, recruit new employers to the area, similar to some of the projects we've done with the Washington County Industrial Park, prepping land for development, and then also attracting educated talent to this area so folks can come in, be residents of Washington County and this region as a whole, and contribute back to the economy here. So that's a lot in one mission statement, and I think it's very important to take a step back and get a true understanding of the history and how we got here. So a little over 10 years ago, there were 3 economic development organizations all operating. The Joint Economic and Community Development Board, some of you may be aware of PC SNAP, actually ran that organization. You had the Johnson City Development Authority, which resided in Johnson City but primarily focused on downtown Johnson City. And then you also had the Public Building Authority, which managed the Millennium Park where the Millennium Center is. All 3 had separate budgets. All 3 had separate staff. All 3 had a separate office space. They had a separate copy machine. They had a separate phone system. So you can imagine how ineffective at times that was when they weren't communicating, but 2, ineffective it was in terms of being efficient with the tax dollars that were provided to those organizations. And so with that as well, they were all governmental agencies, all appointed officials from a governmental body or served in some role as an elected official on that board. There was no engagement from the private sector to a high degree, and the private sector saw an opportunity working with government to really enhance economic development opportunities and have that collaboration really come to light. So a group got together, hired a consulting firm out of Atlanta called Market Street Services. Some of you all may have been part of that. I think Commissioner Carriger may have been a big part of that as well at his time as the city commissioner in Johnson City. And they came in and really assessed Washington County, Johnson City, and Jonesboro and the opportunities of economic development and really what was going on at that time. The big picture was there was a lot of ineffectiveness because of lack of communication. And communication is probably the most critical thing in anything that we do, whether it's a relationship with our spouse, whether it's working at where we go to work every day, or what you do right here as a commissioner. So with that, Market Street Services really outlined a scope and a plan of how they wanted to see economic development work that would benefit all. So with that lack of coordination, you can obviously determine that one of the things they talked about is consolidating services and putting them under one umbrella. So communication was forced to happen, that when someone was looking at downtown, but ultimately looking in a manufacturing sector, that the Downtown Development Authority was talking to the Economic Development Board. And vice versa, if someone came into the community looking to start a small business and wanted to consider Johnson City as a whole, that they got pointed to the right people. So all this came together, and a CEO was hired in July of 2010, and ultimately he worked over the next 6 months to consolidate those groups and have one unified vision under one umbrella. So that leads to ultimately where we come in with NetRep and the new acronym that you all have heard about recently since coming on this commission. And I came in January of 2011. I had an opportunity to really see the Economic Development Council come to fruition, which was a great learning experience for me. But more importantly, I had an opportunity to work with elected officials and private sector businesses to really recruit opportunities to this community. So as we saw success in Washington County, a lot of our neighbors saw jobs leave the region, leave their communities. And in about, I think it was 2014, the executive team of Nuclear Fuel Services reached out to me, and they reached out to Gary Mabry with the Johnson City Chamber of Commerce, and they asked us to come down and talk about what we could do to help them recruit talent to their area. They were having a really tough time recruiting engineers. Another piece of it that was kind of scary when you think about a 700-job employer, they talked about how 50% of their workforce was set to retire over the next 5 to 10 years. That's a lot of folks. That's 350 people that are set to retire out of a pretty big piece of our economic engine of this region. And as we sat there and were concluding the meeting, I just asked a simple question to the 7 of them. Where do you all live? All 7 of them lived in Washington County. All 7 of them probably made over $100,000 a year. All 7 of them really are an important part to the economy of Washington County because they not only live here, but they're spending their money here, sending their kids to school here. And as I took a step back and thought about it, I went back to our board and talked about the need to really look on a regional scale of the importance of economic development, because if that employer were to move operations somewhere else, you will feel the impact in Washington County. So as we looked at how do we move forward, it really was determined that we needed to work as a region. And what was obtainable was really looking at the metro at the time, the Johnson City Metro, made up of Carter, Unicoi, and Washington County. And so that was a lengthy process. There were a lot of conversations with governmental officials, with private sector businesses in each of those communities, and it led to the formation of NetRep, where we actually kicked off officially in 2017. We were able to work with public and private sector to raise over $5 million to go towards a program of work. That program of work really is centered around 5 things: the retention and expansion of existing companies, marketing our metro as a whole to consultants and outside world, site development and infrastructure, which I would also lump in there with incentives being a tool to help with that side of it, community relations, engagement with our stakeholders, just as I'm doing tonight, and then also asset development and talent attraction. More of an unconventional styled economic development, but when you're not growing as a region, we have to do everything we can to attract people to come here and fill jobs and be citizens in our community. So it gets back to really what we're here to talk about tonight and future projects that we're going to ask you all to consider. How does all this work in terms of incentives and roll into what we're trying to do as an economic development organization? There's really tools in our tool bag. One I want to talk about is tax increment financing. This has really primarily been used with the Johnson City Development Authority. Back in 2006, ultimately this commission heard a presentation from the JCDA and allowed the JCDA to move forward with a TIF district and utilizing that tool to recruit new opportunities for redevelopment and also jobs into the downtown area. And TIF primarily is a way to offset new taxes based on improvements on real property. They're used to improve blighted areas, enhance infrastructure, and create opportunities for redevelopment. And really the best way to explain it, it's a way for developers to secure a loan for a project and have money up front to go into that project to make it viable. This is not new to Washington County. This is used all throughout the state of Tennessee. Leading into this meeting, I got curious about Knoxville. It's a region that we consider a competitor, that we lose a lot to at times. And currently, as they sit, they have 47 TIF and pilot projects on the books. That's a lot. We're barely over 10 when you really look at it from the TIF and pilot standpoint.
Did some research on all of that, about since 2008, Knoxville has done 286 million.
It's been a big way for them to create opportunities for growth, specifically, in their downtown, but also too, they've done this on sites outside of downtown Knoxville to recruit anchor tenants, do residential developments. It's been a pretty significant tool for them, and for a region that's experienced anywhere between 5 to 6% of growth per year, it's pretty substantial. I bring that up because it's not uncommon for communities. Knoxville is a very close competitor of ours, only an hour and a half away, to say that this is something that's not just new to Washington County. But I do want to make sure that each and every one of you all understand how it works. That's why we've held workshops. That's why we want to come in and communicate. And we've had conversations one-on-one, or we've spoken to the CIA committee. I want to make sure you all as elected officials fully understand this and are comfortable in the things that we're asking you all to vote on. As we look at the downtown TIF district, to kind of give you an outlay of what that looks like, 25% of the revenue that's created in that district, and when I say baseline, that goes all the way back to 2008 when the base taxes were set. So anything in terms of new tax assessment that's coming into that area, ultimately we are able to capture that as the development authority and use that to make projects work. Make projects work in that district, whether it's redeveloping dilapidated structures, doing improvements to infrastructure in and around that area, and just trying to bring economic growth there. So the way that it is structured within the county, that a project is completed, Washington County reinvests 75% of that tax increase in taxes back into that district to allow the JCDA to go out and make projects happen. 25% stays right here with the county and goes towards the operating budget. So since 2008, the TIF district values increased $88,698,700. Now that is a mixture of commercial and residential as well, but key projects that have happened in there have spurred additional growth that didn't need TIF financing. I don't want to come before this commission to ask for a TIF for every single project that's coming into downtown. What we look to do is try to look at substantial projects that we think will benefit all of Washington County, increase that tax base, and bring new jobs to this area. Specific projects like University Edge, that was a former foundry. You talk about the cleanup and the environmental implications with that site, the infrastructure that needed to go in there to actually service residents of a new student housing complex. You look at Cherry Street Commons, an old industrial warehouse where basically the floors were slanted about 4 feet because they used to take tobacco bags and let them flow down the hill to the railroad. And you look at Paxson Place, which basically was a single-story area made up of about 3 buildings that were in very bad disrepair, and not really much was going on with that, and we were able to convert that into a 27-unit apartment complex to bring more residents into downtown. All these projects have increased value and ultimately have helped the county in terms of operating revenue as you look at things like funding schools. Another tool that we have is payment in lieu of taxes, referred to as pilots. They're used to offset new taxes based on improvements to real property and also the addition of personal property. Primarily, pilots are used as we look at industrial incentives, as we look to recruit companies, say, in the Washington County Industrial Park. All 3 companies that have landed out there have been part of an actual payment in lieu of tax deal. Also, as we've looked at improving projects and vacant buildings that have been in Johnson City recently, some of those projects have been pilot incentives as well. We really want to make sure as we look at these deals, is there a reason as to why we do that? I can give you a great example, and some of these are outlined right here with pilot projects. A pilot hadn't been done in Washington County since 2007 until we hit 2014. We were just going through the recession. As we really looked at some of the challenges we had as a county to recruit jobs to this area, it became very evident we didn't have product. And when I say product, it's just like as you go out to sell something in your line of business, if you don't have anything to sell, chances are you're not going to do too well. So we really were trying to assess the product that we had. We had a facility in Traco that the roof was bad. Basically, had been sitting empty for about 3 years. A lot of damage had been done to that facility. A lot of things had been stripped out, like the copper wiring. As we look at the Bosch facility, it was in decent condition but needed major improvements. That was another big loss that we had to the community. As we look at the old Superior plant out in East Johnson City, that was another building that had been sitting vacant for some time. There were quite a few pigeons in that, and I remember walking through that with Neil Poland with Mullican Flooring. And so altogether, we had about 1 million square feet of industrial space that was vacant at the time in 2014, and a lot of it was in disrepair. So as we strategized as an organization and working with Alicia as well, we tried to figure out how can we spur growth and create opportunity. And we realized pretty quickly that if we could create an incentive deal for companies to consider these spaces, ultimately they could improve those buildings and bring jobs and fill up space and put it back on the tax roll in a productive way. So as we sit here today, all that space is basically in Johnson City, where we really focused at that time where we had the heavy influx of that industrial space. It's all full. And if you really want to look on a large scale, at that time, the facility in Gray that Mitch Cox had considered and brought forward to you all a few meetings ago, that was actually occupied at the time and since had become vacant. But also, too, I want to point out the Washington County Industrial Park. It's more than just a facility. Alicia has done a great job utilizing her relationship and expertise in the industrial side of things to get this site ready for development, to get these 2 sites ready for development. We have 2 industrial sites, one that will house 500,000 square feet, the other that will house 150,000 square feet that has infrastructure, road, water, sewer, all ready to go to it. I bring that up because in order to make a deal happen, we are going to have to consider a pilot. It's going to have to be something that this commission ultimately takes up and decides, is this something you're willing to do and want to do, to create jobs into this community. And so I want to make sure as you make that decision in the future when that time comes that you have all the information you need and you understand how these programs work. So in how we fit in all of this, I really rely a lot on Alicia. When it comes to utilizing these incentives, primarily pilots, and I'll have her come up here and speak to each of the pilots that we've been able to use here in Washington County. But Alicia is our Vice President of Business Development. Her scope of work really is focused around industrial recruitment, working with our existing companies that are here, looking at site development, she was our point person for the Washington County Industrial Park. She was actually able to go out and obtain grants, almost to the tune of $1 million to go towards that project to support Washington County, and really working with each of them on talent attraction and workforce development. I think Joe did a great job really introducing her and talking about her expertise, but the 5 years she's been here, she has been really a key figure to help create those jobs here in our community and really getting sites and buildings filled up. Her role working with the local RITA, the Regional Industrial Development Authority, is part of the reason why we wanted to bring her on, because she had a lot of relationships with her existing companies, but two, she understood the industrial side of things and what it took to land a deal. And then having the expertise working with the state of Tennessee, with the Department of Economic and Community Development, working directly with companies as they were obtaining incentives and making sure projects got over the hump. I can't think of a better person to hire and come in and really do that role for this organization. So with that being said, I want Alicia to come up and really talk about the pilot process and how we've been able to use it as a tool to create jobs here in this community.
Good evening, everybody. So we're going to take kind of a closer look at pilots. I don't drop the remote. Okay, so just a little bit of background on pilots. So they're created by state legislation, and they enable industrial development boards to discount, reduce, or freeze taxes, property taxes, for up to 20 years. Remember, industrial development boards are independent, and they're appointed by the commission. Pilots are a very common practice. They're used by communities across the state for recruitment, expansion, and retention projects. And we use those to win a deal or close a deal. So let's talk a little bit about what I mean by retention, expansion, and recruitment projects. So a recruitment project is a new company coming in. It's a new industry. It brings new jobs and new capital investment. It's typically brought by the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development, or TVA. A retention project is typically a company that's at risk. So what we want to do is retain the jobs that they currently have. Those types of projects are identified at the local level. And then an expansion project. That's an existing industry that's experiencing growth. That can be bricks and mortar, it could be new jobs, new product lines, and those types of projects as well are identified locally. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we evaluate a project. So we look at a variety of factors, including how it benefits Washington County. Will it bring growth and opportunity? We look at new job creation. Those typically are full-time, and it's over a 5-year projection. We look at the wages. Will it help us move above the median income? And then we look at the capital investment over a 5-year period as well. When I talk about capital investment, what I mean is spending that has long-term value to a company. It could be the building, it could be the purchase of additional land, infrastructure, acquisitions, landscaping, a variety of factors. And then one of the other components that we look for is workforce availability. Now, I know that's a priority for this commission, and projects right now that are coming in are really hyper-focused on the workforce. 3 years ago, it wasn't that way, but currently, everything has a workforce component. So each of the pilots that we're going to look at, I want you all to keep in mind that every single pilot that we've done is different. There's no two that are the same. They're all negotiated on a case-by-case basis. The terms are different for each. Each pilot has a remedy for non-performance, and they all have reporting requirements. They vary from one pilot agreement to the next. And then each of the pilots that we're going to look at tonight has either met or exceeded the terms of their agreements. I hope you all can see this. So the first one we're going to talk about is Nakatetsu. So Nakatetsu was a competitive recruitment project back in 2006. It partnered with Koyo out in the Washington County Industrial Park in Telford. So those projects came together with a consultant leading the chase for both projects to land at the same location. They ended up landing, like I mentioned, in 2006. Nakatetsu had a $12 million capital investment projection and was projecting 58 new jobs over 5 years. They had a baseline number of 0, as all recruitment projects will have. And when I say baseline, that's the existing numbers, the existing number that a company has when you start the count. So if we're talking about an expansion, that number's not going to be at 0. It's going to be at whatever the existing full-time head count is at that company. So anyway, so they had a baseline number of 0. Their performance reports are due on the 31st of January of each year. They started their pilot in 2006, and their pilot is now completed. So they've gone through the terms of the pilot, and they're now paying 100% of their property taxes. The next one we're going to look at is Koyo. And as I mentioned, Koyo came at the same time as Nakatetsu Machining. So they started at the same time, 2006, landed on the other site in the Washington County Industrial Park. They had a $20 million capital investment and projected 100 new jobs over 5 years. So just remember, everything that we're going to talk about has a 5-year projection. We look at that on the local level in terms of 5 years. The state looks at their incentives in terms of 5 years, and TVA looks at theirs with 5-year projections as well. So Koyo's baseline was at 0. Their pilot started in 2006, and some of you might remember in 2016 they came back with a qualified expansion that was written into the terms of their agreement, and so they invested another $8 million and projected the creation of additional jobs. So their reports are also due January 31st of each year. The next one we're going to talk about is NN. So that was a competitive headquarters project, a recruitment project as well. We were competing with Atlanta, Charlotte, and Raleigh. And you all might know a little bit about the company itself. So NN was started in 1980 in Irwin. It went public in 1994. They hired a new CEO in around 2013 and started making acquisitions. So they wanted to combine the headquarters that they had in multiple plants to one single location, and that was the competitive piece of the recruitment part. So that project announced in 2014. They had a $9 million CapEx projection and the creation of 200 new jobs. Their baseline starting number was 10. So they had 10 when we started the pilot. Their annual performance reports are due May 9th of each year.
But they have moved. Can I ask a question about that?
Certainly.
This is one of the pilots, I guess. You're out in the community, you probably hear a lot about them. People read about the paper. And they're on the news. NN is one that comes up a lot. Are you telling us that NN has met all of the agreements that was made for this pilot?
They have met or exceeded the terms of their
So they
agreement.
have 200 employees there now.
That's not the term of their agreement. Their agreement outlines that they have a certain period of time to create those 200 jobs.
What about the capital investment that they said they were going to make? Has that been made on that project?
I can get their reports if you'd like. If you'd like to send me an email.
I've looked at what the county has and assessed that, and what they said they were going to spend, and it's way below the
The thing to
numbers.
remember about what the records that the tax assessor has is, if you remember earlier, I talked about capital investment and what that meant. Capital investment is not necessarily just what shows up on the tax rolls. So there's other expenditures that are included under capital investment that may not be taxed on.
So investments that we're not receiving taxes on.
Correct. If they made an acquisition of another company, construction on the building, there's lots of factors that go into capital investment.
Well, the construction on the building will be part of it, because that's part of the assessment on the property, as well as anything they buy, personal property or in the business. But so you're saying if they bought a company somewhere else, that would count as part of the capital?
Part of the capital investment. It does not just count building and land or machinery and equipment. There's other variables that go into it. Like I mentioned, if you'd like to send me an email, I'll follow up with you.
Okay.
You're out of order, sir.
The next project we're going to talk about is Dentsply. That was a competitive retention and expansion project. So retention, remember, that's an existing company, that those jobs might be at risk. So that company started with 189 jobs. That was what our goal was, to retain those jobs and hopefully create more. So part of this agreement involves capital investment projection of a little over $16.5 million, and the creation of 25 new and the retaining of 189 jobs. That was a key component to the incentive that was offered on this project. Their baseline, like I mentioned, was 189. Their pilot started in June of 2015, and their first performance report is due July 31st of 2020.
I have another question about that. Just like when you said with N&N, that the 200 jobs were not part of the pilot, how could we see what these agreements are? Because I was led to believe that was, and when you look at this, you're saying that they have 189 baseline jobs. Do you know if they still have that many people employed there?
Their first report is not due until 2020.
Because I've actually been told they have less than that now.
One other thing to note on Dentsply is we competed with Oklahoma on that project. So one thing I'm not sure I really drove home was that each of these projects are competitive. There's a competitive component to every single project that we're going to mention here tonight.
Could you answer, do you know if there's less than that working there now?
I don't have the records with me.
So you don't know the numbers?
Not offhand, I don't.
Okay.
I have some questions. Can we have a meeting, an open forum meeting in a county commission where you do have those answers and records?
If you'd like to send me an email, I can get it to the attorney for the Industrial Development Board that has those records, and he can send you the records.
But I'm talking about, can we have a meeting like we're having tonight with you and Mr. Miller to have a question and answer session on what you're presenting to us? A lot's being presented, but we don't have a lot of answers to the questions that are coming up, and there's been very few questions come up to this point. And I'm sure there's a lot more questions around this table, but the only answer we seem to be getting is if we'll shoot you an email, you'll shoot us something back. I'm talking about for the taxpayers' benefit too.
Yes, please. Mr. Reed, you gotta take into account, not a snapshot in time or where they are. Ultimately, when you look at Dentsply and the work that we're doing in 2020, that's ultimately if they meet your standards where they're at, with what's out in that area. And there's a remedy in that if they do not, there are fallbacks, there's provisions in there that protect the county taxpayers.
I understand, but I think all I'm asking, maybe I said it wrong, I think all I'm asking is, if you have an opportunity to shoot me an email and give me the answer to that question, for instance, the question of how many people are employed there now, based on the time frame of the total number of employees they agreed to have by a certain time. If you can shoot me that in an email, then I would appreciate the fact of you being here in person and having that information in front of you to answer that question. You know, your answer to my question instead of me and you communicating through an email and me being one of 15 commissioners that's involved in that.
And Commissioner Edens, if I could just jump in here. So they're not required to file a report with us until 2020. I've got the current report numbers for all of the rest of the projects. The terms of their agreement outline that their first report to us in terms of performance is not due until 2020.
So do you have it on NMN that you asked about?
I certainly do. I don't have the report with me, I have the number.
Just a point of clarification, so your point being specific to Dentsply, almost doesn't matter how many employees they have now, the benchmark for measurement as to whether or not they fulfilled their commitment is January of 2020.
Correct. Correct. They have not, indicated to us at all that they'll be leaving the Johnson City area. They've,
It's not intended that corporate headquarters is moved, but they still have an office here, they still have employees here, they still have an accounting department here, they still have manufacturing operations.
and they're still hiring. They're currently advertising now.
They may have moved the corporate headquarters, they haven't moved the office that's there on Mockingbird Lane.
Correct.
Well, if you have the numbers, you know, we asked, it said 10 to start with, and we heard 200, so how many people are working there now?
As of their last report, which was May 9th of last year, they had 62
62 at the corporate, at the office in Johnson City.
at the office in Johnson City.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, that was from May 9th.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Sure.
Here, well, you two guys have been up there, I think part of the issue with some of these is, you're talking about terms of the agreement, all being different and all these, and I would venture to say that a lot of city people have no idea what the terms of those agreements are, and the public doesn't know what the terms of the agreements are. And when questions get asked, you don't get an answer, or there's not an answer in public, it's in an email. So I think what you guys are just trying to say is we represent the public, that's what we're here to do. And the transparency of these things, to me, is one of the big issues.
So,
I agree with that, yeah.
so each of the agreements, and they're called tax agreements, are different. So it depends on each project. There's no cookie cutter for any of these tax agreements. What they address is the terms of the pilot. How long is it going to go out and at what percentage? Some are scaled, some are not scaled. They're scaled at 20%, 10%. Some are 5 years, some are 7 years, some are 10 years. So the tax agreement outlines that. And then when we move forward a little bit more, you'll see a sample of the performance requirements pulled directly from one of the tax agreements. But you'll have to bear in mind that they're not the same for every single one. But basically, the tax agreement outlines the terms of the property tax abatement, how long it's going to be, and at what scale. And it also outlines the performance, job performance, how many jobs you say you're going to create in this specific period of time, which is going to be 5 years. That's what the projections are for. And then along with the performance requirements, there is a remedy for non-performance. So that's outlined in every single tax agreement. What happens if you don't create the jobs you say you're going to create? You said you were going to create 25. You've got 5 years to do that. We get the last report, and you didn't create your 25 jobs. Here's what's going to happen when you don't create those jobs. So that's outlined in each of the tax agreements. Sure. So you can bring you can do a property tax abatement for 3 years at 100% on the improved value on the property. So as an incentive, they pay no property taxes on that improved value for 3 years. So it's abated at 100 or discounted at 100%. In year 4, they're going to pay 25% of the value of the improved value. In year 5, 50%. So that, in that particular instance, it would go up 25% each year. That's just an example. That changes with each tax agreement. It kind of depends on what the project, what's driving the incentive. Is it freeing up capital on the front end, or is it something that can be split up over time? So if you're negotiating with a prospect and they need the capital freed up on the front end, then 100% abatement the first 2 years would work well, because it's a savings to them right on the front end. So it just depends on what's driving the incentive negotiation on that particular project.
The public hearing has already ended. I could only go to the commission and ask them if they would like to hear your comment.
I'd like to hear it.
There's no objection. Right now, currently, we have a proposal going on, so if you will remain seated, I'll get to you as soon as we can. But I'd appreciate you letting us finish this and then I'll come back to you.
So let me mention too about the tax agreements and all of the documents pertaining to each of the particular pilots. So we keep a copy. The county attorney's office is given a copy. The Industrial Development Board has a copy, and the company has a copy. So there are copies of all of the tax agreements.
How many pages?
Well, the tax agreement is just one of the documents that's included in a pilot closing, but tax agreement may be maybe 10 pages on just the tax agreement. There's, like I mentioned, there's other documents that go along with the tax agreement.
So all those documents can be turned in, or just the tax?
I believe they don't have the entire package for the closing documents unless it was specifically done through the Washington County Industrial Development Board. Big notebook, you know, it's kind of like closing on your home, a bunch of documents, only multiply that by about 8 times, and it's about that thick. But for the pilots that were done at the closing documents, if they were done through the Washington County Industrial Development Board, then the county attorney's office has those. If they were done through the Johnson City Industrial Development Board, then we have those.
I think that these are pretty complicated arrangements, and there's a lot of moving parts. And,
There are.
you know, they're done through another semi or quasi-government body, the JCBA or the IDP, and I think that's part of the issue, transparency and understanding of it, because they're very complicated in terms of, you know, X, Y, Z, this happens, this happens, this happens. You know, the IDP takes a loan out, they buy buildings, they hold the title, or, you know, how all that works. And I would appreciate it if all of us could have good explanation of how they work, and the public too.
You know, we've done a couple of, I've been with the Northeast Tennessee Partnership for about almost 5 years now. We've done most recently a TIF and pilot workshop, I believe back in October, that Mark Mamontoff came in and did. We'd be more than happy to see if we can get either get him to come back in and talk about the differences and the types of incentives that pilots and TIF are, or we can get our hands on the presentation and just kind of play it that way. We're happy to do either. Do you have a preference?
Pretty well.
Sure.
I know that some of them, like the one you just talked about, 2020, but I also know we got a large investment in this line. But I don't know permission from that too.
So the Dentsply was both a pilot and a facility lease, and I believe 2018 was the year the lease payments started coming on that one. Dentsply, yes, their first lease payment was due June 29th of 2018. It does. So, would it be helpful for me to put that information back into this presentation and send that back to you all? Okay. Okay, so what you're looking for is their current number, head count, where are they? On their current head count according to their most recent report, if I understand correctly. And then the other piece of that was what was the terms of their agreement in terms of how long is the pilot and whether it's scaled or not scaled. I do have that information about, I think the majority of these. Their current capital investment. Some of the companies are not required, according to the terms of some of the agreements, which are all different, some are not required to report their capital investment, that the incentive was based on the job creation. So we may not have a capital investment report for some of those, but every single one of them has a job creation component. Yep, I certainly can. Yep, I certainly can.
Alicia, I think what's needed is, when you take all this information and boil it down, so you can see who's performing and who's not performing, what they need to do, what timeframe they need to get in, and then maybe a little information as to what the jumping are if they don't.
Okay.
If they don't meet the 6 months, certain time. And I understand the difficulties that you got, everyone's different. But if somehow you could synthesize, boil it all down, where, you know, we know what's at risk, are they performing or not performing, and what are the remedies.
We can do that. We can put together a summary on each project that adds in that job creation, where are they and what are the terms of the pilot.
Because I think that's what I hear being asked, is, you know, these companies performing, and if they're not performing, you know, what's the remedies out there, and how much exposure for the taxpayers?
And you got to remember too that the start date, as we're looking at these, we've done maybe one a year. We did those 2 in 2007, Nakatetsu and Koyo, and then it wasn't until 2014 that we started doing them again. So the one that we did in 2014, the terms of their agreement are coming up to a close now. If you look at the 5-year projection, the one that we did in 2017, they're early on, and so their job creation number is not going to have to be met until 5 years out. So we need to keep that in mind when we're looking at the summaries. Look at when they start and how many years they have left to meet that job creation number. If you look at the NN number of 62, they're almost to their 5-year period. Their report that we have is due, like I mentioned to Commissioner Harris, May 9th of last year was their last report. So they're not required to give us their report with that final number on that 5-year projection until May 9th of this year. So that's when we'll know. But as of this date, all of these companies have either met or exceeded the terms of their agreement.
Can I ask
thus
one more
far.
question? You know, looking over all these, and I've spent quite a bit of time digging through all the numbers. It takes a lot of time to look at all that, and I can't find any of them that's really performing with what they said they were going to perform. I'm talking about the value of the properties. I'm talking about capital investments. There may be one that I think is close. And is there anybody in your office that looks at those numbers to see, you know, just like the Silverdale project, you know, was supposed to spend $7 million, and it's only appraised at $3,700,000. And it's all these promises are made, but you know the county is not seeing the benefit when they give these breaks. I'm not really against a pilot. If it's to bring in jobs, I've got 3 kids that hopefully will stay here and work. But what I don't like to see is deals made and it's not been lived up to the promises that were made. Who in your office looks at that, if anybody, and who enforces it?
Well, the thing to remember, like I mentioned, is that capital investment does not necessarily show up on the tax assessor's records.
Well-
not every piece of capital
So,
investment.
so nothing shows up with the personal, so,
Probably on that silver deal, Mitch probably spent no telling what, I'm trying to get the numbers,
so,
on demolition, we had captured that. I know, for example, my board of information and so forth, took all the concrete out of it, we already had price for concrete, took all the electrical out of it, already pressed it, put a new roof on it, we didn't have it on, we had a roof when it built.
yeah.
So what capital improvements does not equal what I've got on the session.
So, but if we're getting promised $7 million in capital improvements, shouldn't we receive that? No, we shouldn't, so we should just say no. But that's only one deal, Scott. I've looked at several of these. There's one on Cherry Street, for instance. I mean, you look at some of these deals, they owe $1 million to a bank, and we've got the property appraised at $200,000. I mean, it just don't make sense to me, so I don't know what's going on, but I can meet with you and show you all these. And, I've sent some of that stuff to you all as well, but I just wish that somebody was checking this stuff, out to make sure that it's, been looked at.
Let's maintain order while the commissioners are speaking. That's the property assessor, sir. I'm gonna warn you one more time about speaking out in the meeting. I don't wanna get us toward any kind of disruption. So let's stay focused on our topic. Commissioner Harris, you had the floor.
Well,
You were speaking to Ms. Summers, and let's stay focused on the presentation that we have at hand.
I guess the question was, who in your office looks at that to make sure that those are being done?
If there's a reporting requirement for capital investment in the terms of their agreement, it's on their job performance report, on their annual performance report.
Is anybody in your office reviewing this to make sure that it is done, make sure that the county is receiving the benefit when it's promised that this money is going to be made?
The reports are reviewed by the state comptroller's office. They are forwarded on to the Washington County Attorney's Office, to the Industrial Development Board's attorney as well.
Has there ever been a third party, an independent person come in and evaluate these deals to see that they're standing up to what was
Not
promised?
our records, not the performance reports that we receive from the companies. The companies, under the terms of their agreement, are required either to have a CPA certify the reports, they could be required to have a third-party auditor or a company officer attest to the job creation numbers. And I think these are all great questions. What I'd like to do is just keep moving
Okay.
through the presentation, and we can do more questions at the end if that's okay.
Heard what said, so in your mind, you got a building, you have to tear the roof off, put the roof on it, so it does increase the value of the building. You don't think that qualifies as capital investment?
What I'm saying, Commissioner, is when somebody promises in one of these deals that they're going to invest $7.5 million on a piece of property, and when you go look at the tax appraisal on it, and it's appraised at a little over $3 million, and they owe almost $7 on it, there's a problem somewhere. You know, there's a problem. We need to get the value out of those properties, you know.
$3 million, $7 million dollars for the roof on it. Me, in my mind, that ought to count as an investment.
If you put a new roof on, that's going to improve the value of your property.
Well, I hear what.
Well, you may spend $1 million on a new
Yeah.
roof, but it doesn't translate.
It may not be $1 million,
Improve the
yeah,
value.
but there's value there.
And
You know,
I think we have to remember that if, that one example cited, if money was spent on concrete,
Well, there's
they might
several.
move off that concrete at Transit Mix or Summers Taylor or.
That's not the only example I have, Commissioner Brown. I can go through a whole list of them. There's several. Yeah.
Correct, now, comment? Correct. May I make one comment about this project? This project came online
Ma-
after the reappraisal. So this reappraisal here will catch. I don't know what it'll be yet, but this is the first reappraisal since this came online. I'm assuming it'll catch a lot of stuff up this time, well, a lot of stuff probably. But, what you spend in capital investment does not equal value to it.
Thank you, Mr. Buckingham. Ms. Summers, will you?
When we had the workshop, I asked, of course, it was rather, we had some specific recommendations to how to make, how to keep whether pilots are successful. And he said that's just a huge challenge, and it's really, really hard for anyone, anywhere, to come up with a hard, fast way to say, this is a number that has been they're maintaining over time, and then how you choose which investments to return. There's more than just sort of a successful result of the economy.
That's exactly right. And we look at a multitude of factors when we're negotiating or incentivizing a project with a pilot. We want to look at the wages. What are they paying? What do they expect to be paying? And where does that put us in terms of increasing the median wage here in our community? That's a key component in assessing an incentive. We look at their capital investment. How much are they investing? How many new jobs are they going to create? I mean, those are all factors that go into determining the value of a pilot incentive and whether or not we're going to offer it. And the state looks at things the exact same way. The Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development, they're looking at wages. How much are those jobs paying? What's their average wage? They look at their health benefits. What percentage are they getting in health benefits? They look at the new job creation. How many new jobs are they projecting over a 5-year period? And how much in capital investment are they going to invest in Tennessee? We're looking at the exact same things that the state is looking at in the exact same way on a 5-year projection. So we're keeping everything level with the way that our partners in economic development are looking at projects as well.
We're gonna need your help. You know, how do we know if we're getting the return on our investment for the taxpayers? A complicated issue, and we're gonna need your help to see if we are, and are they living up to the terms of their agreement. I think those are all fair questions that need to be answered. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if, you know, maybe our CIA committee ought to have a workshop to take these individual programs or deals and go through each deal one by one and spend some time just looking into the minutia of each deal. I don't know if that's appropriate or not.
Commissioner Krieger, maybe the commission should have an entire workshop, and let's all sit here and hear the same breakdown of these projects all together. And I know there's times that we all can't attend each other's committee meetings and have other commitments. But if the commission would like to commit to a workshop, I'm sure that we can, Ms. Summers and Mr. Millers and maybe Mr. Manitoff would be willing to attend and maybe dig a little more in depth in that. Commissioner Wheeler?
I think that's a very good idea. I think that's what that will allow us to move forward. This is a pilot, and we feel like we need to talk about the capital investment. We can, we've got to agree. I assume we have to agree to the terms of those tax agreements. So, that may be something that we need to look at. What do we put in as far as reporting, and how do we want to look at capital investment? Because it looks to me like what I've understood is that in a lot of these, the emphasis has been on the job numbers.
Correct.
As opposed to the increase in the property tax base. And, those are, which Mr. Miller mentioned early, you look at both of those are goals of them long term, and maybe we want to look more closely at that. But by evaluating all of them, and all of us being involved in that, will give us the opportunity to look at those agreements a little sharper when we get them, and decide what we feel like is important for the county.
Caught us without the vocabulary or the understanding of the difference between TIF and pilot. I certainly understand that TIF is for the blighted areas. Very different. But, it takes a little, you live with this all the time.
I know.
We don't. And so that's why these questions are coming up, and we have to get a clear understanding.
I understand that, and I appreciate that.
Ms. Summers, if you'll please continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we were talking about the Silverdale project. So this was a competitive expansion project, and it involved a company called Lab Connect. So Lab Connect was in the Johnson City area and was leasing about 15,000 square feet, and they ran out of space. This expansion and renovation at the Silverdale facility enabled that company to move into 54,000 square feet. The pilot that was done on that particular project was a 5-year pilot that began in 2017 and was scaled at 20% increments. Their annual reports are due June 30th of each year. They've filed 2 reports so far, and they have a total of 80 new jobs that have been created. Their projection on that over that 5-year period was 101. So they've got several more years in the term of their agreement, that 5-year window, to create that 101 jobs. The next project we're going to talk about is LPI. This was a competitive recruitment project. We were competing with Florida and other areas in Middle and West Tennessee for this project. LPI is a great little, I say great little company. They're the #1 hot tub and tanning bed manufacturer in the U.S. They selected Johnson City for their manufacturing facility in 2016, and they moved into a building that's about 286,000 square feet. Their pilot started in 2018. It's a 7-year pilot, and it's scaled kind of wonky. They have 100% abatement the first year, and then it goes 10, 25%, 40%, 50%, 65%, 80%, and then 100%. So in 2025, it's 100% back on the tax rolls. And we also did a pilot on equipment on that project, and that was 5 years in 20% increments. Their annual report is due on June 30th. They projected $7 million in capital investment and the creation of 290 new jobs over that 5-year window. And their first report was due, like I mentioned, June 30th, and they reported 137 new positions. No, we competed with Florida for them. Yes. They came from a facility in Kingsport. They were leasing a 150,000 square foot facility and ran out of space and were landlocked. So they were looking at moving their manufacturing to either Florida or Middle Tennessee. We did not incentivize. You'll notice on that one, the baseline number is 115, I believe. We did not incentivize the 115 jobs. They were in Sullivan County, and we don't incentivize jobs for companies that come in that are our neighbors.
Do you know if they have 115 employed there now?
I know that they reported 137 new positions on their first report.
When was that?
That was June 30th.
When they report something like that, does anybody go check to make sure the numbers are accurate?
They provide backup data.
I've been out there several times, and I've never counted more than 60-some cars in the parking lot. And they run one shift. I know we got a lot of questions. I won't ask any more on these, but I just wish that we would check close on them.
So this is a picture of the nearly 300,000 square feet that was vacant from 2010 until 2016 when LPI took over the building, and they're now in full production. And then our last one is Mulliken Flooring. This was a competitive expansion project. We were competing with West Virginia and Kentucky for the expansion. Mulliken began operating in Johnson City in 1985, and I think you'll find some of this interesting, that they expanded in 2009 with new product lines. They expanded again in 2012 with the purchase of the new facility. Some of you may recall Mulliken Flooring was located kind of on the outskirts of downtown along State of Franklin and along the rail. And they outgrew that facility, and they purchased the Superior Wheels building out on Woodland Road, which kind of doubled their manufacturing space. So they did that back in 2012. And then in 2016, they'd outgrown their space again, and they purchased a building, 126,000 square feet, that was available probably less than 2 miles from their manufacturing facility. The second purchase was on Roland Drive, and they're using that for their warehousing and distribution now. But freeing up the warehousing out of their manufacturing facility enabled them to bring in a couple of new product lines, and they'll be creating about 200 new jobs as a result of that. So the cumulative effect of these 7 pilot projects, if we assume that the companies are going to meet their projected capital investment and new job creation, those 7 projects equate to 975 new jobs and about $78.7 million in capital investment. And that's just on those 7 projects. And I'm showing this, this caption with the former governor to kind of give you an idea of how they measure success as well. So the governor measures the total number of new jobs created during his term and the amount of capital investment. That's one way that we measure success, is the new jobs and the CapEx. So those 7 pilot projects, based on the performance reports for this year, this past year, represent a total increase just in payroll of over $19 million. So those new jobs created as a result of these pilots have brought in over $19 million in new payroll. And then how much are we discounting? This was pulled from the Office of the Comptroller. And in Washington County, we're very conservative with the amount of property taxes that we're discounting. I'm not sure you can see that, but we're less than 2% of our property taxes are being discounted through property tax abatements. And then the industrial development boards own less than 6% of the property in the county. And that falls in line with the amount of taxes that are being abated. And then demystifying the performance requirement. So this slide gives you, a good example of the reporting component and the performance requirement component. These are contained, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, in each of the tax agreements. They outline exactly when the report is due and how that backup data needs to be presented, whether it is a third-party auditor, a CPA, or the company officer attesting to the job performance numbers, and then the backup data that they need to provide with that. And then the performance requirement outlines what the remedy is for non-performance if at the end of the term of the agreement they have not met those terms. And just remember too, these are all different in every single one of the pilots. The reporting requirements are different, and the non-performance remedies are different as well. And then this is a sample of the performance report. So this is exactly what the report looks like. If the company is required to capture their capital investment, then that goes on this form. Their job performance, their job numbers are required on the form, along with the backup data. And then in most of the tax agreements, there's a cost-benefit analysis. And the the cost-benefit analysis looks at things like the new jobs created, what the value is of those. They look at the indirect jobs, and those could be construction jobs, service jobs, restaurant jobs, retail jobs, shopping, that type of thing, as well as sales tax projections, what they anticipate this project will bring to the community. And then what drives the deal? So it varies by project. So every project is different, and I know you all have got to be tired of me saying that. It involves the availability of sites. Do we have a site? Do we have a shovel-ready site? Do we have a site ready to build on? We look at job creation numbers or job retention numbers. We always look at wages. We always look at capital investment. And the availability of a skilled workforce is forefront in every project's mind now. Going back about 3 years ago, when I would get a request for information in, it would ask specifics about your site, the infrastructure, the utilities. Occasionally, it would ask about workforce. What kind of training, higher ed or training institutions are available? Where do folks train their employees? That was a maybe on an RFI. Today, every single RFI I get, first it tells me what they're looking for. Are they looking for a building or a site, and what size? And second is detailed information about the workforce, not just where are we going to get trained. They want to know what kind of skill sets they're learning in high school. They want to learn where they can go after high school. I mean, it's very, very detailed. So it's a major component to every request for information now. Every time we put our foot forward to submit for a project, we're telling them about our workforce. And then thing to remember too is that our competition is everywhere. It's 49 states, it's 94 counties, and every one of our competitors are offering an incentive. If we don't put an incentive on the table, our project we're eliminated from the project. We have no chance. Commissioner Carragher, I'd like to have the opportunity to talk to the CIA committee and kind of do an anatomy of a project for the CIA committee to kind of give that group a better understanding of how a project works from start to finish.
There again, I don't know. I guess my question I'd written down here at the very end of this meeting was a direction from the commission as far as you wanted a commission workshop or a committee workshop that we're all invited to attend. So, I mean, I would kind of like direction from you all how to set that up, because it's ultimately the most important people to come is this commission. So I guess we'll be taking a recess here in a few minutes, and maybe we can think about that during the recess.
So the last thing I want to mention is really that it's all a negotiation, that if we want to stay in the game, if we want to bring new jobs, if we want to increase the median wages for our community and increase the tax base, that we have to be part of this game. We have to negotiate, and we have to have incentives put on the table in order to play.
The county has been involved in the negotiation of the reporting and the performance requirements, is that correct?
They have pilots involved industrial development boards. They're the only entity through the legislation that can actually do a pilot, can authorize a pilot.
Okay, so the IDB is involved in looking at this document. Does the county attorney look at this document?
The documents are all provided to the county attorney's office.
Before the deal is struck?
Yes, yes. Okay. And they've been, I believe, at each of the closings as well.
Okay. So that would be our opportunity to say, like, for instance, on the reporting, this example you gave, and I know you didn't have these questions, but just deals with the officer certifying. There's nothing mentioned about backup data in that little phrase. So down here, when we get to backup data, I'm assuming there's no backup data on that one necessarily.
No, they'll all have backup data.
Okay.
Everyone has backup data.
That must be in another section we don't have here, but that's, that's, looking at that, I'm thinking, well, you can look at payroll tax records, lots of information that could get us a real number, as opposed to just taking someone certifying. But that's
up to us. I mean, we have approved, we, being the previous commission, have approved these and looked at those
They have, yes,
provisions.
yes.
So we would have the opportunity to impact that. Thank you.
I think every job is important. I think it's great. Whatever, I don't want to do anything to hurt any of these places and cost them any jobs, because every job's important. My only goal is to make sure when we give somebody a break, because there's other people that we're not giving breaks to. There's a lot of talk about, is it fair to give one another? I know anybody can ask, but you know, who decides? I just think we need to make sure they live up to the bargain. I'm not against, I would love to see, I think we need more manufacturing in Washington County. I think it's been many years since we've had a new big manufacturing plant. It'd be great. I pray all the time that we do, because I've got young kids, they've got friends, and we all want to keep them here. So the questions I've asked you, none of them, I don't want to hurt any of these jobs, but I just like to see them live up to their end of the bargain.
Thank you.
And if I may, I just want to clarify a couple items in my mind, but part of what's been done tonight, yourself and Mitch, and thanks for the information, but is you're kind of comparing and contrasting TIF versus pilot. Is it correct to say that regardless of the type of incentive, it has a defined life? It has a beginning and it has an end. It doesn't continue forever, correct?
That's correct.
And then is it correct to say that a pilot program or project can be done anywhere in the county, but a TIF project has to be done within a TIF district? Is that correct?
I'm the pilot person.
This project can be done in the county. Ultimately, this group would decide where this district would need to be established.
Well, I guess that's my point. At the moment, the county has how many TIF districts? Is there anything that prevents the creation of additional TIF districts throughout the county?
No, there's not. But ultimately, you need to look at their flight infrastructure, their major needs for improvement infrastructure, water, sewer, highway. Those are all part of it. You want to look at help with small branch, yes, because there is an opportunity to look at something there. But you also have to evaluate where is this going to go. I would say that it's more driven by the project, company, or developer more than it is municipal district.
Thank you.
One of the things that I'll say, we just talked about jobs, one of the things that I can point out, part of that is evaluated by the state Department of Labor and Workforce. You can get on their website, you can see the amount of jobs and the wages that have been brought in through this community. A lot of that is the work that Alicia has done, but also we have spent our jobs. So it talks about $62 million in wages in Washington County. That's not a number we're throwing out there. That's a hard number that you can see in the state website and understand that is value to economic development.
Before you go to that website,
Jobs.Tennessee.com is the website where you can see what jobs and pop up. There's a data set for any county in the entire state. You can even compare counties and see how Washington County is stacking up with Warren County. And look at data that goes back a really close to
that's where you get the numbers, and you increase $3,000 in the past 7 years.
Right.
And it's jobs with the number 4, PN.
Commissioner, you can also look on the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce. I looked at their site, and one thing that stood out to me is 2016 to 2017, job growth in Tennessee statewide was 1.5% job growth in that year, and Nashville's job growth was 3.2%. Chattanooga's 2.1%. Our job growth up here was 0.5%. And some other information I looked at, I talked to Dr. Smith and Dr. White out at the university. We talked about population, and he gave me some figures to think about. He said migration of people into, in 2008 to 2018, the city of Asheville has a net migration of 40,775 people in that 10-year period. Knoxville's had 42,262 net migration, and Johnson City's net 6,740, and Kingsport's even less than that. Kingsport's about 5,000. And the sense I got out of talking with professors out at the university is that older people are moving into our area and the young people are moving out. And I think it's something that I think this commission needs to be a part of. How do we deal with the issue of jobs and the complicated issue that I guess we can begin tonight to take a look at that, see what we can do. Yes, that's for 2016 to 17. Yeah, and Kingsport Bristol was 1/10 of 1%. I looked at non-farm payroll employment, and this came from Dr. Smith out at the university, 2008 to 2018. Asheville has grown 9.2%, Knoxville 5.8%, and I think Chattanooga's around that number also. Johnson City is a negative 1.1%, and Kingsport is a negative 1.2%. I think we've got our goals and problems ahead of us, and I think as we discussed in that retreat a couple weeks ago, jobs and capital investment ought to be number one, because I'm not sure how many, I asked the professors, how many of our college students graduating ETSU find a job in this area. The Nashville Economic Development Board on their website posted that 70% of their college graduates stay in the Nashville area. I don't know what it is for us, but those are all issues I don't have the answers for, but we as a commission, I think, need to take a course and get involved in jobs, people, investments, things like that. I think we owe it to the taxpayers of Washington County, because the bottom line is, in 10 years' time, inflation's 2.5% a year, and we're not growing. We're going to have about a 25-30% increase in the cost of doing business, and we've only got 3 ways to deal with it: raise taxes, cut services, or cut employees. So we need to really, as a group, come together and see if we can't do a positive effect on jobs.
So I want to thank you all for your time and your interest in our pilot programs. I'm going to speak for Mitch and say that he and I would both be more than happy to come to a workshop and talk more specifically about pilots. And if we need to bring in an expert like Mark Mamontoff to come in and talk about those as well, we're happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Summers.
Very informative.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Okay, thank you everyone in that rep for this review. I think if nothing else, I believe it has drawn attention to the complex nation of pilots, and we all look forward to learning a little more about them. I look forward to working with you all throughout the coming year, and hope you'll put us down for periodic reviews. Thank you all for being here tonight. I trust our CIA committee will take the lead to request a presentation that is more focused on what goes into an actual deal, so that we can all have a better understanding. Our trustee knows we're all focused on pilots, and shared with me that the top 25 personal property taxpayers in Washington County, 4 of them are pilot projects. So we do get some revenue from those guys. And so perhaps it's a good time now to ask Rick Story to come up and just share a couple of words about his job as trustee, and followed by Scott Buckingham, and then I bet we want to break them.
Commissioner Ford? All right, let's, Mr. Mayor, I've had several requests for a recess. We can take a short 10-minute recess, Commissioner Story. Sir, just as soon as this presentation is finished, I'll address the commission to see if they'll, when they'll work. Or do you all want to go ahead and address that before we take the break?
I have a short comment on it.
He just has a short comment. My only problem is there's no portion for public comment in the commission rules. We would have to suspend a rule to hear his comment.
Commissioner Light indicated that he
So, I was just addressing the commission myself to cover the rules with them. Since there's no portion in the commission rules, I can't allow him to speak without suspending a rule. But since the public comment portion has already passed, we have a motion to suspend a rule. Motion and a second to suspend the rule. Suspending the rule requires a 2/3 majority vote. Do we have any discussion of suspending the rule? All those in favor of suspending the rule signify by saying aye. All opposed? The rule is suspended. Sir, if you'll come forward and give your name and address to the clerk at the podium, please. If you'll come forward to the podium and give your name and address to the clerk, I will give you 3 minutes to address the commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Matherly, and I would like to
I want to ask thank you for your patience. It's just a process.
Understood, and I apologize to the commission because I've never been to a commission meeting before.
That's okay. That's all right.
I would like to know how these organizations,
yeah, give me your name and address.
David Terdick, 3306 Honeywood Drive, Johnson City, Tennessee, a city taxpayer and a county taxpayer. But I would like to know how these organizations who've just presented and involved in representing Washington County and Johnson City, how do they determine the tax incentives? Because I thought, according to Tennessee Code Annotated, that was the job of the county and the city. And as a tax-paying citizen, I'm very interested in how those incentives are determined, and I think the commission might be interested as well. Thank you.
Mr. Terry, we have a workshop, hopefully, coming up here pretty soon, and that will be open to the public as well. And be sure and come to that, because I'm sure that we'll all be interested in learning more there. So thank you for your comment. Thank you for commissioners for suspending rule and hearing this gentleman, and we'll take about a 10-minute recess.